As it says on the slide behind me, my name is Hugh Donnellly. I'm from an organisation called the Co-operative Education Trust. And as with previous speakers, I would also like to thank SEMA for the invitation. For me, coming to Lisbon has a special place in my heart. I am a supporter of a famous football club named Glasgow Celtic, who in 1967 were the first British team to win the European Cup, which they did at the Estadio Nacional, a few miles from here. And I hope to be back in Lisbon next year to celebrate that 50th anniversary with you again. I would also concur with earlier comments about challenging the English-speaking hegemony. And as a Scottish person with Irish descent, I do not speak proper English, and I just hope that the translators will be able to cope with the Glasgow dialect which I speak in. So, Alberto had asked me to look at the concept of productivity, and for my sins many years ago I took a degree in economics, and a basic definition of economics is making the most efficient use of scarce resources. And when you take that to the level of an SME, a small business, it's about productivity. What I'm going to look at are the arguments, the economic arguments for productivity, why it's important. There are obviously different aspects of how we can improve productivity at different levels of the economy, and have a look at then what employee ownership has to contribute to productivity. And again, in the standard arguments mainly offered for employee ownership from economists, from governments in terms of supporting it through tax breaks, is that if employees have a stake in the company, they will be more interested in seeing the company perform well because they will share in that success. So we'll have a look at those, and I will also try and go through this fairly quickly, as I know we are slightly behind and you'll all be eager for lunch, so I'll try and not linger too long. Bernard made references to neoclassical economics, and that kind of drives an awful lot what passes for attempts at productivity. It's we want growth, we always want economies to grow, and there are very valid, sound reasons why economies can grow and why they should grow, and workers can possibly benefit from that. I think the issue with neoclassical economics is, and your General Secretary I think referred indirectly to this in his opening comments, is that yes, we have no problem with increasing profits and making more profits, companies growing. The question is the distribution aspects of that growth, that productivity and that profit, which doesn't automatically happen. And I think hopefully that's some of the areas that we'll try and look at today. So in terms at the macro level, in terms of the national government, the European Union, there are many things that can be done to improve performance, improve productivity in the economy. In the United Kingdom context, we have a long-standing problem that we underperform in comparison to most of our competitors, whether that be on a European basis or on a global context. A whole variety of reasons for that, but we do, and it continues to fall. In fact, a recent press report suggested, just to give you the feel for that, speaking about the USA and the United Kingdom, falling productivity means Americans are seeing their living standards decline. The UK's recent productivity performance has been almost as dismal. Output per worker grew by 0.2% in the last 12-month period, well down in its pre-financial crisis trend of 2.3%. So that affects growth, it affects people's standards of living, and it has an impact. So at the national level, the macro level, there are lots of things you can do to invest. You can invest in your human resources by providing proper education by providing training for people, supporting training schemes for people who are in work, apprentice schemes, a whole range of different things. You can obviously invest in the infrastructure of the country, the roads, the rail, the transport setups to make things easier for companies to perform. One of the big areas, and Bernard has touched on the thorny issue of the proposed, I might say the proposed exit of the United Kingdom from. There has been a vote, a referendum, where a small majority voted to leave the European Union. Scotland voted to stay, Northern Ireland voted to stay, London voted to stay. The people who drove that winning argument essentially lied. They fooled the people of England into voting, and they now have no idea what they're supposed to be doing. They have no plan, no strategy. Whether they will actually be able to effect an exit, I think, remains to be seen. But that's for another day. I'd like to kind of focus on not something at the level of an SME that you can necessarily control to any great extent, but there are technology advance, new technologies coming through. There was one of the speakers earlier on spoke about that in great detail. And yes, as consumers, as citizens, we can benefit greatly from advances in new technology. I mentioned my favourite topic, Glasgow Celtic, I'll mention again. It took me 3 hours to fly from Edinburgh to Lisbon yesterday. When 10,000 Celtic supporters travelled to Lisbon in 1967, it probably took them 3 days to cross Europe by road and rail and any other means that they could. And I'm led to believe there are actually still some of them left here who never quite made the return journey, but haven't identified them yet. So, new technology, but there's a kind of double-edged sword there, and it's been a topic that economists have been discussing for many, many years, and it seems to have come back round again. Again, to give the kind of example, financial services have been mentioned. My first job when I left school was in a bank in Glasgow. I worked in a branch. I dealt face-to-face with customers, took their payments in, gave them their cash out for the weekend, the week spending, and there were a dozen or so people who worked in the branch beside me. 40 years later, there is no branch. Most people deal with a bank online. If they want cash, they go to a machine, an automated telling machine. So technology has made life easier for bank customers, but in terms of employment, tens of thousands of jobs have gone in that particular sector in the United Kingdom. Many more have gone for other reasons, of which Bernard is feeling the pain, but in terms of technology. So there's a huge issue there. And again, just to give you an article that actually appeared this week, talking about this very subject, that the primary culprit in terms of job losses is technology. The digital revolution has helped supercharge globalisation, automated routine jobs, and allowed small teams of highly skilled workers to manage tasks that required scores of people. The result has been a glut of labour that economies have struggled to digest. So whilst that's not the main focus of what I want to talk about, I think it's worth something of flagging up that increased productivity can be a double-edged sword, and whilst I don't think it will happen in our lifetimes, the predictions are that in the not too distant future, there won't actually be that many jobs. So how will employees, workers, how will people earn a living? How will society organise itself to cope with that change? There's obviously some element of jobs that can be increased in terms of services provided, but there must be a limit to how many McDonald's hamburgers and cinema visits that people can make from that. So just a slight aside to highlight that aspect. But getting back to, sticking with the things that, in terms of employee ownership that can be done at the macro level, and I think the point has been partly made already, when I talk about employee ownership, I'm coming from a background where most of my life has been spent supporting the development and the promotion of worker cooperatives, which is a very particular and distinct form of employee ownership. It's a one person, one vote democratic form of employee ownership. There are lots of employee share ownership plans in the United States, as Brendan mentioned. Some of them, the employees have the majority, so they actually have a controlling interest and they take the major decisions. When I speak about employee ownership, I'm speaking of a majority or 100% of democratically owned business, which has a slightly different culture and a slightly different way of working and making decisions from other companies who have share plans. I think practically all of the top 200 companies on the London Stock Exchange have share schemes. I doubt very much if the employees there have any say whatsoever in the strategic direction of those companies. Added to the earlier point that there are no supervisory boards, there are no worker councils. They simply are given shares as a form of profit sharing, and it does not affect the decision making. We've heard about the ESOPs in the USA. The equivalent in the United Kingdom is called a share incentive plan, and again, going back to my original comments, the main driving force behind the United Kingdom government 10 years or so ago bringing in significant tax breaks to encourage employees to take a stake in the place of work was to increase productivity, to get workers working harder and producing more output from the same resources. Again, Bernard has touched on the concept of succession planning. I think is the most relevant area for SMEs, and like Ireland, Scotland has a high dependence on SMEs. We have a lot of external ownership of industry in Scotland, but more than 50% of employment in Scotland is in small, medium enterprises. It's a problem right across Western Europe that many of these small businesses, perfectly viable businesses which could continue to employ people, disappear because the owners do not plan their succession. So they get to a point where they have to retire through ill health or just can't carry on any longer. They sell off the assets, jobs are lost, a perfectly good wealth creating, income generating, employing business is lost. And ESOPs can be used in a very distinct way to make that transition from management or family owned to employee owned happen over a period of time, simply through sharing profits and, if necessary, raising finance. It's something that Bernard and I have been involved with for the past 20 years, promoting across Europe through a body called the European Federation of Employee Share Owners. And it's an area which makes a lot of sense. A lot of these small family-owned businesses in particular will have got to third generation of the family running the business. They will have third generation employees working in the business. Quite often, in the case of the more rural parts of Scotland, as in Ireland, they will be a significant employer in their local economy, and to lose that business, which might be very small in terms of the employment on a national scale, but for that particular location can be quite significant. So I think there's a lot to be done there, and hopefully I think that is about to come back onto the European Commission's agenda and start promoting that again. So at the level of the firm, I say it's a good way. It can simply be about profit sharing, but the evidence, and I'll come on to that later, is that if you go beyond simple financial participation and you combine employee participation and decision making, that's when it starts to increase the productivity. For the owner, I've already said, it could be a fairly medium to long term strategy. It's not something that the owner has to, or the employees suddenly have to find X million pounds, X million euros to buy the business today or the business closes. It can be done over a period of time. And in terms of protecting the employee ownership aspect of it, and Bernard touched on that with the Irish examples, it is possible to have a significant block of shares held in a permanent trust, which would be very unlikely to agree to any sale of the business. The good examples of that are John Lewis department stores in the United Kingdom which is one of the biggest retailers in the country, employs over 100,000 people all across the UK. They are entirely owned by a trust, and the trust is run for the benefit of the employees. The objective of the trust, from set up many years ago, is quaintly to secure the happiness of the employees through gainful employment. And I'll come back to that. The economic thought is that the best thing that any company can do is try to maximise its profit, and if it maximises its profit, then everyone will gain from the trickle-down effect from that happening. There are other alternatives, there are other ways of approaching, and John Lewis is at the other end of that scale. Their purpose in life is to keep their employees happy, and probably the best way to keep employees happy is to keep them employed with good working conditions and good terms. Right, I think I've probably covered most of the limitations as I've been through there, but just to re-emphasise them. Certainly financial participation can do something, but it's more about aligning. Most big companies see it as a way of aligning the company's objectives and bringing the employees into line with them. I think they miss a big trick in not bringing in employees into the decision making, but I think you then come up against cultural aspects. Someone else who can touch on the topic, but I've got into a situation where an owner is trying to sell the company to the employees, and the employees are sceptical and say, why would we want to buy this company, the condition it's in and the way it's been run. And I say to them, well, you can change that, you know how the company can be made better, you do the job every day. And they said to me, well, yes, and we come forward with these suggestions, but I'm told to be quiet. You're not paid to think, you're paid to operate that machine. So there is a big threat factor, probably more from middle management than top management, that can block these things. But when you do get the two things working together, it can make things happen. So I'll give you some evidence to that effect shortly, but I think that where I'm coming from in terms of this economic democracy is there was a colleague in a long-running worker cooperative in Edinburgh called Edinburgh Bicycle Cooperative. They've been going for about 30 years. They have retail outlets selling bicycles and all the accessories. He does a regular presentation where he compares, going back to the 1970s, General Motors versus Luxembourg, and we actually have someone from Luxembourg with us today. And he made the point in the 1970s, this general officer, the general manager, chief operating officer, ran it very much as a dictatorship. And he, not exactly equivalent terms, but the turnover of General Motors at that time was greater than the gross domestic product of Luxembourg. It was bigger than a European state. And he asked the question that had Luxembourg been run by a dictator, would George Bush invade to restore democracy? And if so, why was he not invading General Motors to install democracy in one of the biggest parts of his economy? So there is a question there: why do we value and promote democracy in all aspects, at all levels of life, yet when it comes to the workplace, it seems to be something that is ignored or forgotten? So the concepts of subsidiarity, community empowerment all fit in perfectly well to the idea of a democratic firm, a democratic enterprise. And I think that then brings us to question, if we only see firms as profit-making operations, their only purpose in life is to provide profit for distant shareholders, is that really good enough in the kind of world, the kind of society that we want to live in? Should companies not be concerned about the environment? Should they not be concerned about the local community of which they are an integral part? And more importantly, should they not be really concerned about getting their employees more involved? In terms of what there is out there to back up these kind of ways of thinking, research done, there's a lot more in terms of employee ownership in the United States than anywhere else, so there's a lot more research done there. An academic at Rutgers, Rutgers University, back a few years, made a comparison of all these companies and came up with results saying that on average employee ownership is linked to a 4 to 5% higher productivity level, greater employability, stability, growth and firm survival through having the employees involved. Financial participation, and these are majority owned ESOPs and states where they have people on the board and then people involved in the decision making. And even more recent and closer to home, a chap a few hundred miles up the road in Porto at the Polytechnic has just published a paper recently where he has concluded that economic democracy does not consist of the simple opposing dichotomy of capital hiring labour versus labour hiring capital. Rather, it contains a radical change towards a collaborative economy. So it goes a bit wider than the concept of capital working for labour. It's about getting the two combined together to the maximum effect. And there are links to those. This one is again a chap that Bernard and I know very well. He was involved in taking his family-owned business into employee ownership, a printing company near St Andrews in Scotland, which had been there for nearly 200 years. He was convinced that the way to survive and the way to prosper was to take them into employee ownership, and he managed to achieve that. He then went off to do some research through St Andrews University, and he compared some towns in Italy with high incidence and very low incidence of cooperative businesses, and came up with the conclusion that attested the prediction that people will flourish in more egalitarian communities, such as those with widespread worker cooperatives, does produce results. There's a copy, I think, in your packs, just a one-page summary of that. Of the 13 characteristics he looked at, the cooperative town outperformed the other two, one with a fairly low incidence of cooperatives and another one with no cooperatives whatsoever, and it outperformed them in 12 of the 13 different indicators. There's been similar work done. Hopefully most of you have heard of the Mondragon cooperatives in the Basque country in Spain. Probably the most successful employee ownership project ever. Started in the 1950s. They've been through hard times recently and suffered like everyone, but there's still over 100 worker cooperative businesses there in a small cooperative economy, and they have been doing research looking at the health and well-being of managers in particular in senior positions in these jobs, and have come to the similar conclusion that people are healthier and happier working in an employee-owned environment than in a traditionally structured firm. This is a final piece to conclude. A Canadian academic who produced this paper a few years ago. Again, the kind of market philosophy has been stolen or adopted by neoliberal type thinkers, and they would argue that the best way to install democracy in countries is for them to have a free market, competitive economy. He has produced that, and now he's actually written a complete book on the subject, and his conclusion would be that, contrary to what some would have us believe, it's not free markets and capitalism that are preconditions of democracy. Democracy has been around since the 4th century BC. Instead, it is democracy that is a precondition for prosperity and capitalism itself. So again, turning the argument round and hopefully giving you a chance to think about things in a slightly different way. I should probably have said a wee bit more about our organisation. We work mainly with school kids in Scotland, trying to make sure that they understand that if they're thinking of going into enterprise, that there are alternative ways of running businesses from a joint stock firm or from a sole entrepreneur, and there are collective approaches. You can look at cooperatives, you can look at employee-owned. One of the things that we also did a couple of years back was produce an undergraduate textbook working with Aberdeen University. So if any of you are interested in looking at in more detail at the concept of democratic enterprise, there is a course that you can lift and educate yourself there. So I think that's probably all I would want to say. I'm help you get back on track, Chairman, in terms of time. If anyone has anything in interest there, I've given links to the various pieces which you can download. They're obviously a lot more substantial than I've touched on there. I'm more than happy if you want to email me about any aspects or any questions, and I will also be here this evening, and if anyone wishes to buy me a Portuguese Sagres beer, I'll be more than happy to discuss any of these things with you. So thank you.